When you start thinking of iconic video game characters, ones that were really impactful in the early days of gaming, there's a few that jump out at you right off the bat. Pac-Man, Mario, Link, and of course Donkey Kong. What was originally planned to be a Popeye game, but due to licensing issues and problems designing sprites to accurately depict Popeye, Bluto, and Olive Oyl, the idea was scrapped and the partially developed game was repackaged with all new characters, transforming and renaming them to Mario, known as Jumpman at the time, Donkey Kong, and Pauline, and the game Donkey Kong was born, becoming Nintendo's first major cash cow. Donkey Kong hit arcades in 1981 and became an instant mega hit, establishing Nintendo as a major player in the video game market in the United States and saving them from financial problems they were experiencing in the early 80s. Donkey Kong became so popular that it spawned off multiple arcade sequels, merchandise, TV shows, breakfast cereal, board games, and the Donkey Kong games found their way onto numerous home consoles. The popularity of the Donkey Kong arcade game also allowed Nintendo to pluck a particular overall-wearing plumber and feature him and his brother in their own arcade game and later the industry-changing NES game Super Mario Bros. The success of Donkey Kong cannot be understated. It put Nintendo on the map in the early 80s, positioned them for market dominance in the following decades, and Nintendo is still a mega power in the world of pop culture and gaming over 45 years later. But something strange happened in the mid-80s. Donkey Kong all of a sudden was playing second fiddle to Mario, who had become the hottest license in video games and made Nintendo a household name. He was basically pushed aside to make way for Mario, Luigi, and their adventures in the Mushroom Kingdom. Donkey Kong started to slowly fade away, and no new games were planned, and it appeared that the big, tie-wearing ape's best days were over. That is, until almost a decade later, when in 1994 Nintendo was about to bring Donkey Kong roaring back in a huge way. Nintendo tasked Rare with the challenge of bringing back their beloved character and announced at the 1994 CES a new game featuring Donkey Kong was on the way for their 16-bit Super Nintendo Entertainment System in a revolutionary new title called Donkey Kong Country. Nintendo spared no expenses when it came to hyping up their new Donkey Kong game. Attached to a $16 million marketing campaign, Nintendo cranked the hype meter to the max with promotional VHS tapes and multiple teases and exclusive sneak previews in Nintendo Power magazine for months leading up to its release. When gamers started getting glimpses of what Donkey Kong Country was going to look like, jaws were hitting the floor all over the world. On November 18, 1994, the wait was finally over, and Donkey Kong Country hit stores and fans were clamoring to get their hands on it. And despite all the hype and promotional material that had been pumping us up for months, when we turned the game on for the first time, within seconds our minds were blown when the simple arcade music morphed into a hard rock jam and the 3D graphics exploded onto our screens unlike anything we had ever seen before. How was this even possible? How could the SNES handle something like this? The graphics, the animation, the crystal clear music with tons of unique and different tracks. This was arcade quality. Heck, this was beyond arcade quality, and somehow this was playing in our living rooms on our Super Nintendos. Everything moved. Everything felt real. It felt alive. The environments were lush and immersive, the creatures, the depth to each level, the rain and the snow in the foreground and background. It literally felt like we were running around in the jungle. Leaves were blowing in the wind, bananas were moving around, enemies were diverse and each one had to be dealt with differently. Blasting in and out of barrels, swinging on ropes and vines, you could ride a rhino and plow your way through everything. Or an ostrich. In what other game, hell, in what other warped, twisted reality can you envision an ape riding a sneaker-wearing ostrich? And you had all sorts of other animal friends to help you along the way. The game felt like you were always moving at hyper speeds. You had minecart levels, levels in the dark, underwater levels that didn't suck for once, ice caverns that glistened and shined, ancient ruins, barrels all over the place that you could break, throw at enemies, or launch yourself out of. There's so many secrets and hidden parts of this game, I don't think I'll ever find them all. Tons of bonus games to earn extra lives, so many different levels that all felt like their own experience. The new bad guys were so diverse and different, you had to develop all new strategies for dealing with each one. All sorts of new characters. Your new buddy Diddy Kong that you could play as in kind of a tag team format had completely different abilities than Donkey Kong. Candy Kong, who allowed you to save your progress at certain points. Funky Kong, who would let you travel around the map to areas you've already beaten just in case you wanted to farm some extra lives. and Cranky Kong, who, get this, is the original Donkey Kong from the 1981 arcade game. And visiting him is an experience all in itself. He berates you, tells you stories about games of the past, and sometimes gives you useful tips if you listen to him long enough. This game was incredible. It completely blew anything away that came before it or was currently out. The soundtrack to the game was so good, it was released on cassette tape and CD. One of the first examples ever of a game soundtrack being so amazing, they released it so you could listen to it even when you weren't playing the game. The music was expertly created to fit each level's theme. The caves were low and full of echoes, the underwater levels felt calm and soothing, the minecart levels sped up the tempo and gave you the sense of urgency and importance. It's one of the greatest soundtracks in the history of gaming. The graphics were so mind-blowing that it immediately made everything else look terrible by comparison. It all of a sudden made your other games seem dull and lifeless. There was no debate who was king in the console wars now. Donkey Kong Country was the most impressive game ever seen on a home console by a very wide margin. The advanced pre-rendered 3D graphics made the game look and feel like real life. Donkey Kong was shattering records and winning countless awards. It won the 1995 Kids' Choice Award. EGM gave it Game of the Year and Best Animation. GamePro awarded it Best Graphical Achievement in Gaming. Donkey Kong Country needed a trophy room for all the accolades it was receiving. And as gamers, we couldn't get enough. Donkey Kong was nearing Mario-level popularity and immediately became one of the faces of Nintendo and remains there even to this day. You can play with 1 or 2 players, with one player controlling Donkey Kong and the other Diddy Kong. Donkey Kong was the strongest and could kill all enemies where Diddy couldn't without a barrel, but Diddy was faster and could jump higher and allowed him to reach places the bigger, slower Donkey Kong couldn't. The game taught teamwork and utilizing strengths and weaknesses, making players develop strategies in order to have greater success. The game had 40 different distinct levels spread across 6 different areas: pirate ships, oil refineries, jungles, caves, treetops. Each area was its own experience filled with all sorts of enemies that ranged in size, strength, and ability. Each level contained secret rooms and bonus stages. Collectibles were scattered all throughout the game, to the rare letters that earned you an extra life if you were able to find all 4, and the bananas that also got you an extra life for every 100 you collected. Animal-shaped golden icons that if you collected all 3 would take you to a bonus world to play as that animal, and earn huge extra life totals. Hidden areas that could only be found by breaking down a wall or taking a leap of faith and hitting a hidden barrel that would blast you away. The bosses were huge and imposing, and made you really have to be on top of your game. The game was challenging, but not overwhelming. It wasn't easy to beat by any stretch, but it never felt impossible. Playing Donkey Kong Country in 1994 was an unforgettable experience. One that shouldn't have been possible on a simple 16-bit system. Rare worked like magicians and was able to utilize every bit of memory the console had to offer, and it played great. The controls were smooth and fluid, and each character handled well. There was never any lag or glitches or slowdown of any kind. It was beyond impressive for its time. Nintendo Power continued the Donkey Kong hype with giveaways like t-shirt iron-ons and all sorts of exclusive merchandise that you could only find in the Super Powers Club book. A CGI TV show based on the franchise was made, adding more lore and backstory to the Donkey Kong world. The game was so expansive and deep that Nintendo dedicated a 120-page player's guide to it, full of complete maps to each world that showed all secret areas and locations. And it should come as no surprise to anyone that 2 direct sequels were made. The Donkey Kong universe would expand into the land of the Game Boy and the Nintendo 64. Donkey Kong was back. He was a major face of the franchise again, a franchise that he built in the early 80s. If not for Donkey Kong, we wouldn't have Mario, and Nintendo might not even be around right now. Before the original arcade game, Nintendo didn't have much of a presence in the video game world in the United States. Sure, they had some arcade titles out, and the Game & Watch things were pretty cool and innovative for their time, but Donkey Kong gave Nintendo an identity and the ability to be what they are today. Of course, Mario took the ball and ran with it in 1985 and built an empire, bringing Nintendo to levels that Donkey Kong most likely wouldn't have. But if it wasn't for that ape kidnapping the damsel in distress and climbing on top of that tower, the world of video games would be very different today. And although Nintendo was soaring in the mid-90s, they had some very stiff competition who were making them earn every dollar and giving them a run for their money when it came to popularity. And when they needed that little boost to put them over, an old friend that hadn't been seen in years came storming back into the picture, this time bringing all of his friends and family with him, cementing Nintendo's place as king of the console wars, and turning Donkey Kong back into the icon he was back in the early 1980s. An icon that is as strong today as he ever was. Donkey Kong Country changed what gaming could be like for home consoles, setting the bar and the standard so high that we, the gamers, were the ones to benefit from it the most.